All right. Talking with Army veteran, Army Ranger Joe Riley from Patriot Family Homes, founder of Patriot Family Homes. Joe, thanks for being here today. Looking forward to talking about what you guys are doing, some great things with affordable housing, mostly near military bases. But we do want to hear what you've done in the Army up to this point.
Yeah, so I was an infantry officer by training, commissioned out of ROTC from the University of Virginia, and then was fortunate enough to have a scholarship to go over to Oxford University in the UK. Did my master's and doctorate in international relations there, then came back and did the infantry, deployed with the Ranger Regiment to Afghanistan, then went to the 101st, and then was in Ukraine actually when I got called to then my final assignment in the Army as I ran our counter-China policy for the Pacific on the National Security Council for President Trump the last 18 months of the Trump administration. And then at the change of the administration, I was, even though I was still active duty, I was shown the door. So at that time, I dropped my packet, did a 6-month career Skillbridge program, and then transitioned out fully in 2021 to the reserves.
You mentioned the career Skillbridge program. Just real quick, since you brought it up, like, what did you think of that program? I've tried to have the retired Command Sergeant Major who's in charge of that program on a couple of times, but he hadn't been able to make the interview. I'm just kind of curious what you thought of that program.
Yeah, I loved it, and candidly, we have had about 10 or 12 career Skillbridge program interns with our company. Some of them have then come to work for us full time afterwards, and some of them we've helped them, then they've gone to law school or starting their own company. So I think it's a great program for veterans who are transitioning. Anybody that's interested in learning about real estate and wants to come intern with us, we're happy to have them.
Awesome. All right. So tell us a little bit about, as you transition out of the Army, did you go right into with the idea of Patriot Family Homes, or would you go get a day job, or what was your transition like?
So for me, it was a little different. So we started Patriot Family Homes while I was still in the Army, actually on a deployment to Afghanistan. My wife traveled for work Monday through Friday, didn't want to spend all of her weekends in scenic Columbus, Georgia, anyway. So we just listed our house, left the furniture in it, and listed it on Airbnb and HomeAway, and realized that there was a big need for this around military bases with families, coming and going, particularly there at Benning for graduations. And so came back and got another one and another one. And then right when I took out my first, sizable loan to go buy several properties, the Army said, "Surprise, you're going to Ukraine." And so I thought, that's how I go bankrupt, because how do I run these very operationally intensive short-term rental properties from a shipping container in rural Ukraine? And luckily, one of the guys that was in my unit, his wife, who's been a West Point grad and been in the Army herself and was now out and did real estate, said, "Look, Kate will take care of things while you're gone." And that kind of unlocked what we say has been our secret sauce, which is this awesome team of military spouses that work for us that need remote, portable, flexible employment. And so, we've got about 45, 50 employees now. And, the vast majority of those are military spouses whose husbands are still on active duty or veterans as they're transitioning out.
Yeah. Looking around on the Patriot Family Homes website before we got in the interview, I was like, holy cow, you've got a really big organization. I mean, you mentioned like 45 employees. Like, if you don't mind me asking, how many properties do you currently have, or you have so many you don't even know?
We've got about 350.
Wow, man, that's awesome. And you also, I want to touch on a couple of things. You started it while you were still active duty, which I would, if for anybody that thinks they want to, start their own business, get into entrepreneurship, if you can start it while you're still while you still get a steady paycheck, by all means, that's the best way to go. The other thing I want to touch on was, too many times when we jump into entrepreneurship, we're becoming a business owner because we want to do things the way we want to do them for once in our life. And we think that means we have to do everything. And then we fall into this solo entrepreneurial trap where we can't do everything. We can't be a jack of all trades. We can't be experts at everything. But what happened to you is you had it forced upon you. Like, you might have been doing most of it on your own. Now you're leaving again, you're deploying. You had to you're either going to go bankrupt or find somebody to pull it off for you. and you did. You went inside your own community, the military community, found a military spouse, and she ran with it. It worked out great. So that's a big lesson in new entrepreneurship is you got to bring in other people to do things for you from the beginning, from the get go. I look back on a couple of my businesses. If I'd spent most of my time writing job descriptions really well, I would have done so much better than just trying to figure things out on my own.
Right. Absolutely. No, I mean, I can't agree more. I mean, you've got an awesome, set of kind of, potential teammates, both in other service members. And, what I found is, veterans are good. Military spouses are great, because they are not, the biggest challenge I find with hiring veterans, and that we try to like get people out of this mindset when they come over to the private sector, is the military doesn't, they don't really work with budgets. In theory, you have a budget, but it's kind of, and you don't have to onboard the cost of manpower, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you're a commander or a first sergeant or a command sergeant major or whatever else, you just want more people all the time, right? The more people you get, the better off you are. When you get out in the private sector and all of a sudden you're the one that's footing the bill for the people, so that's the biggest challenge we have. Is we'll have, vets come to us, all right, we need a person to do this, this, and this, and this. And I said, no, we need a better process to do this, 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 and this, because the process, doesn't cost us much. The person, you've got to have teammates, don't get me wrong. But that's one of the biggest thing I encourage people to think through is like, don't immediately resort to who do I need to have do this, but like what needs to be done. And is it a process problem or a personnel problem?
Right. Well, if you don't have the process ironed out and really fine tuned, then you can't really hire somebody to that process. And I think that's another rookie mistake is not automating and systematizing your processes, even if you're the one doing them all the time, every day. Because the first step in getting help or hiring anybody is having a big chunk of processes all ready to go and turned over to somebody else. If you don't have those processes figured out, it's tough to just hire somebody and say, just fix everything for me.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I do have somebody that works for me right now that if I just say fix something for me, she figures it out. But those she's a special individual. So
Yeah.
and I've had a lot of VAs over the years. And most of them are, you need to do this, 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 and this. And they're very good at that. If you tell them exactly what to do, Sarah is one of those fire and forget weapons that she brings problems to me and she says, I noticed this, but I already fixed it for you. So those are
Yeah.
hard to find, but you got to have the systemization and the automation in place. So talk a little bit about where you were. So where were you at size wise when you left active duty? And how long have you been out? I know you're still in the reserves. What's your growth been like?
So we had built up while I was in the Army up to about 100 properties. And then in the past year, we've kind of, more or less 3x that.
In a year?
Yes. Yes.
Kidding. Wow. Dang, that's incredible. So if you don't mind me asking real quick, where's the capital coming from for acquiring the properties? You have a set of investors.
Yes, we have a mix of both properties that we own ourselves that my wife and I have kind of put together.
Huh.
And then we've got a couple other large, what we would call separately managed accounts
Hmm.
that we run. And then, we work a lot with individual owners, family who may be, so we manage a lot of properties for other folks as well. So somebody who's PCSing from one base to another wants to list their house as an Airbnb, we often work with those. And then in addition to that, we also do a rental arbitrage. So we'll work with landlords who may want to sign a master lease of, 3 to 5 years and allow us to turn around and sublease. So those are a couple different options that we have.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Mhm. Okay.
All right, back talking with Army veteran Joe Riley, founder of Patriot Family Homes. So, Joe, on the break, we were talking about some of the things that you've got going on right now. You actually have a really good internship program, and it's tied in with the Army Career Skills Program, which we talked about at the beginning. So, tell us a little bit about what an internship looks like, either for future veterans, anybody getting out of the military, and also military spouse job opportunities.
Yeah, so we'll start with the internship first. So, we've gotten to work with some great interns ranging from, full bird colonels to, junior NCOs and kind of everywhere in between. And so interns who come and work for us, a couple different paths they could take depending on what they're most interested in. So our company's organized around an acquisitions department, and that acquisitions department then has a group that's focused on buying new homes. It's focused on the kind of the rental arbitrage master leasing strategy, and one that's focused on sales and business development for traditional kind of management of short-term rentals. And then, once a house moves from acquisition, the next phase, if it needs it, is renovation. So if you've got if you're interested in construction or rehabbing or house flipping, we've got a reno department, so folks can go work in the renovations department and kind of see how that works. And then after the house goes from renovation, it then needs to be furnished and set up. So we run our own warehouse. We procure all the furniture. So if you're interested in logistics or interior design or something of that sort, we have to procure all the stuff, get it in the warehouse, have it organized in the warehouse, coordinate delivery from the warehouse to the house, and then obviously furnish and stage the home. And then finally, then you have your kind of ongoing management of the properties, and that we split into two categories. One being, traditional kind of on the ground property management, maintenance, cleaning, where, like local, staffing and so forth. And then the digital piece, which is all the kind of guest communications, guest services, pricing, managing the platforms, all the technology, that piece of it. And then finally, we have our back office functions, which are, HR, insurance, and accounting. So really, if you, all the way from if you want to go be a house flipper to if you want to be, work in accounting, we've got a different place we can plug you in. The one thing that I require of everyone is I'm a big believer in the kind of Walmart, Sam Walton model of, you kind of Waffle House model as well. You in Chick-fil-A, you kind of start at the ground level, and you got to be willing to do the job of everyone that you might be in charge of one day. So I tell people, we had somebody who came to us one time and they were like, I didn't, they were very frustrated in the early days of their internship because we were having them do some, pretty basic menial stuff in houses. And that wasn't exactly what they had in mind. And they said, I didn't come here to, to change locks and change toilets. I came here to learn about business development and was business development real estate. And I said, how do you think I started my real estate and business development career? I started, changing toilets and changing locks in the very first house and the second house and the third house. And I didn't hire my first employee till we had, about 25, 30 houses. So, full disclosure, you got to be willing to get your hands dirty in whatever aspect that may mean customer service. It may mean, being out in the houses and doing some cleaning and some maintenance. But, what we try to do is take someone from the ground up so that they understand all different facets of the business. And then as they go through their internship, they become more specialized in what they're going to do. So yeah, any of those opportunities, acquisitions, renovations, logistics, staging homes, ongoing management, technology, HR, accounting, you kind of name it, we've got opportunities for folks. And that translates to military spouses as well. So, then we have, part-time and full-time employment options for military spouses. A lot of those folks wind up, because they either need flexible or they need to work remote. So a lot of those end up, kind of working in that kind of customer service or back end, office work that can be done remotely. But, certainly we've got some great military spouses who are either willing to travel or who currently live in a market where we're up and operating and want to be kind of on the ground and doing those things. And then increasingly, we've got a great number of folks to us that are spouses of veterans, and their husbands gotten out, and maybe now it's their time for their career to take front and center. So all of those different options out there. And we've got some children of service members and veterans as well who work for us. So we love to, my wife in particular is very passionate about providing, employment opportunities for military spouses, given, we, like most families, moved, I think, 7 times in 8 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of opportunities for folks who are looking for it.
Wow, that's incredible. So it works out pretty well, especially for the military spouses. If they come to work for you, maybe at one base or post, the next PCS, most of the time they're able to maintain their job, or if not that particular job, you've got something else that they can easily be remote for if they weren't remote from the last place they came from.
Right.
Yeah. And as far as your customers are concerned, obviously you're mostly dealing with the military because you're mostly around military bases, but do you have a little bit of non-military customers here and there? I mean, not like you don't want to deal with regular civilians. It's just, you probably don't even have to. You've got so much military business that almost all your customers are exclusively from the military community.
Actually not. I mean, that was how we started. And what shifted from that was COVID. So, I think historically, if you'd asked people, what's the most stable source of housing demand that you can think of, it'd be the military, right? No matter what happens, the military is going to move. And then COVID hit, and the Secretary of Defense put in a stop movement order, and we lost 90% of our reservations in the first week or two of March, when in 2020, when the order went into effect.
How much did the stop PCS? How long did the stop PCS thing go on?
I mean, our military traffic died up for at least into the summer. So we realized pretty quickly we had to diversify. So we've since moved beyond just military communities. So we're in normal vacation communities and normal urban, communities as well. So no longer just focused on the military. I'd still say about 60+% of our business is related to military bases in some capacity or another. But not exclusively anymore.
That's interesting. Yeah. Being retired for many years at this point, I had no idea that had happened. I can only imagine what the stop move thing, how that affected schools and
Oh yeah,
everyone. I finally got my dream job. Nope, you can't go. It's like, oh, I can only the flow down effect, ramifications of all that just must have been horrendous.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been
So
business wise. I mean, geez.
yeah,
Well,
it was a rough go for sure.
yeah, no kidding. So you have a lot of regular PCS moves, and then talk a little bit about the difference between properties you own for yourself, properties you manage for other people. If somebody wants to offer their house up as a PCS short-term rental versus a long-term rental, what are some of the interesting variations and all that?
Yeah. So, what we found is that, as families move around all the time, if you're like us, eventually you get tired of packing up the whole house. So what we say is another option is you can literally just leave your furniture in the house. Maybe you have to take some things with you and supplement some stuff, but then use your property as a short-term rental instead of a long-term rental. What we find is the cash flow off of those is, much better than what they are on long-term rentals. Sometimes, the top line revenue can be as much as 3-4x what your traditional long-term rent rates would be. And your biggest cost actually in starting up a short-term rental is the furniture. But if you've already got the furniture in the home, that significantly reduces your cost. So that's
you charge a much higher rate for a short-term rental.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, because you're charging on a nightly or weekly, basis, and so yeah. I mean, we will routinely, because in our rental arbitrage business, we'll routinely come in and pay, $1,500, $1,800, $2,000 a month in long-term rent, and then turn around and make, 5, 7, 8K a month in short-term rent.
When you say rental arbitrage, explain that.
So we're basically coming in and signing a 3 or 5 year lease on a property within permission from the landlord to operate it as a short-term rental. So they get the benefit of a guaranteed long-term lease. They don't have to release it every, year, or worry about tracking down payment from tenants or whatever else. And then, in return, and so, in that scenario, if we're paying you $1,500 a month in rent, and we make 1,000, then, been a bad month for us, because we still have to pay the 1,500 plus the utilities, plus, the cleaning, plus everything else. If we turn around and make 6,000, then good month. So we basically onboard that risk. So sometimes you'll have property owners who they want to participate in the upside of if the property goes really well as a short-term rental, and they're willing to accept the downside risk of slow months, seasonality, and everything else that goes along with the business. And then others say, you know what, I'm happy with my long-term rate. If you can guarantee a long-term lease for 5 years, and I don't have to think about it for the next 5 years, and you handle more of the maintenance than what a normal tenant would, yada yada yada, then great.
And so the other benefit is if you've got a house like that, you got all your stuff in the house, you don't have to pack it all up and move it to storage and have it get ruined in that process. I mean, you probably take a lot more damage and hits packing stuff up and moving it and putting it in storage and pulling it out of storage than you do just leaving it there and let other people live there.
Yeah.
As far as your furniture and stuff goes, and you can always get rid of take out the expensive stuff or the stuff you can't afford to.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, do not put, grandma's precious furniture into a house. If it's grandma's furniture that you just want to get rid of, then perfect. But if it's a priceless heirloom or a really expensive piece of furniture or art or something like that, you have to recognize these short-term rentals for what they are, and they're good cash flow, but they're going to get beat up.
Yeah. Rental arbitrage. So being Amazon sellers, my wife and I, we're very familiar. We have a whole business based around retail arbitrage. We're getting out of Amazon now though, but I've never heard of rental arbitrage. That's fascinating. Great concept. Yeah. Did you come up with that on your own? How did you stumble across that opportunity?
Well, I just ran out of capital. In starting a business, anybody starting a business knows you have a constant game of what's your constraining factors at capital or labor, right, or capacity.
Yeah.
And so there have been times in our business where capital was our limiting factor and we had plenty of excess capacity. So we're kind of in one of those situations right now. We had a big push in the fourth quarter of last year. An investor came to us. We needed to buy him roughly 100 homes in one quarter. So we expanded out the team to be able to go and deploy that. And now we're kind of building up our kind of next, source of capital to go out and deploy. But in the meantime, right, we've got all of this, capacity of great people that we've trained, but not a ton of capital to go out and buy a bunch of new homes. So we're actually now pushing. So last quarter of last year, we did like no rental arbitrage, right? We had no interest in it because all of our bandwidth was focused on buying new homes. Now, while we're waiting to build up more capital, we've turned back and we're starting to get back more heavily into the rental arbitrage game.
No kidding, man. I love that idea. Like the more I think about it, like I've never heard of that concept. I mean, it's so simple, but I've never heard of anybody implementing that, especially in a grand scale like you guys are doing. So, well, that's awesome. All right.
I mean, you do have to be clear. You've got to be very careful with it. So when
know the area.
Yeah. Several. So there are some bigger companies that do it, like Sonder. There was a company called Stay Alfred that did this, Lyric, a bunch of these that did it in apartment buildings. So they would go out and lease entire floors of apartment buildings and then turn around and sublease those. And most all of those, except for one, went bankrupt during COVID, right? Because urban traffic dried up. They were still on the hook for their lease payments. They had no equity in the property to be able to secure their debt. And so they just went bankrupt.
No cash flow, goes to zero.
Right. So, we typically don't do arbitrage in apartment buildings because we find that the arbitrage opportunity is greater on larger homes. If you just think about what is a short-term rental or an Airbnb, it is itself a volume arbitrage off a hotel, right? So what's the cost of, 4 hotel rooms versus a 4-bedroom house is much different than the cost of 1 hotel room versus a 1-bedroom house. And so to the extent you're arbing long-term rates, again, so analogy I give is if you're, we've got properties that maybe pay $1,000 a month in rent and then get $3,000 as a short-term rental. That's an okay deal, but when you build in all your extra costs, it's not that great. Versus, you pay $2,000 a month in rent for a house and get $7,000 as a short-term rental, right? So that then delta is much more substantial. So that's where we find that people often want to go do it apartment buildings because it's what's easiest, and that gets people in trouble because really, again, you got to recognize it for what it is, which is a volume play vis-a-vis hotel rooms.
Wow. Well, so Joe, if you're talking to somebody that's still in the military, in transition on the way out, just got out, whatever, they're looking to get into entrepreneurship, whether it's real estate or rentals or that kind of thing. Like, what kind of ideas come to mind? Things you wish you could tell yourself a few years ago when you first started doing this.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing I would tell myself is to have gotten some, advice from, worked with somebody who knew what they were doing. I made a lot of significant mistakes in the early days, still make some today.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have, almost made a couple of mistakes that would have completely, hosed me. And then, luckily my wife had better sense.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be my biggest advice is that, again, as a plug for any sort of internship program, the private sector is a very different world than the Army. And there are definitely transferable skills, but there's a lot of stuff that you kind of have to relearn, and you should take advantage of the opportunity that the Army and the Congress and the taxpayers have given you to be able to kind of get a runway off, or, some people call it a landing strip. I guess if you're wanting to fully retire, it's a landing, but I think of it for, a lot of folks as a runway to take off into the next opportunity.
Yeah.
And instead of having to do that, the day you exit the military and you have no income and no anything else, it's much easier if you can kind of prep the battlefield a little bit and start out, before that final out date.
Absolutely. Like, if you can get things going before you get out, absolutely. Like, almost like if you can get a business going and it's making money, and the only thing keeping you from expanding is your military job's in the way and taking up all your time, that's like the best position to be in, because then when you get out, all of a sudden you can go all in with it and then scale it from there. So that's the ideal situation. Or if you can get all those mistakes out of your system while you still get the steady paycheck, that helps too. So, well, if somebody's interested in Patriot Family Homes, either they're looking for a place to live, or military spouse or a veteran, somebody getting out interested in the career skills program, how would they get a hold of you?
So they go to patriotfamilyhomes.com. So that's just go to www.patriotfamilyhomes.com. You can also send an email to info@patriotfamilyhomes.com, and they'll kind of gather in your inquiry and then point you to, based on what you say your interest is, point you in the direction of the right folks to kind of help figure out a way to get you plugged in.
Awesome. Well, Joe, you've definitely, I want to ask you this real quick question. Now that you've made it, as far as entrepreneurship goes, would you consider yourself unemployable? Meaning, like, could you imagine going back and working for someone else these days?
I don't know that I would say I've made it yet. I wake up every morning to a hefty interest payment. So, I think I'll have made it when I retire, if that ever happens. But
yeah.
No, I would never go back and work, and I would be completely unemployable. And I was probably unemployable from the start. So that's probably why the Army got rid of me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That entrepreneurial attitude, that entrepreneurial mentality, it's almost like an ownership mentality. Just trying to
We,
plug yourself back into a large organization just doesn't work very well.
we were in church last Sunday, and our Sunday school leader said, are you somebody who asks for permission or forgiveness? And we go around and typical, I love, typical Sunday school class, most people permission, 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 permission. We got to my wife and she was like, I asked for apology. And they got to me and I said, I've never asked for permission in my life, and I only ask for apology about half the time. So,
That's awesome. Well,
yeah.
hopefully you're invited back next Sunday.
That's right.
All right, Joe. Well, thanks for sharing your entrepreneurial success story. It was awesome. And, look forward to your future success.
All right. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right. These two veterans, Oscar, Mike.